Hey everyone, we are going to get working on your practice test for comparing and ordering fractions and decimals. So watch this video if you want some help or to check your work. Hey everyone, here is your compare and order fractions and decimals practice test. So you can see here we're going to start with comparing some fractions. Then we're going to move into comparing decimals before we get to the back where we are ordering them. So let's start with number 1. We have 3/4 compared to 1/4. Remember your comparing fractions steps here, the different things you can do. First we can ask, are the denominators the same? In this case, our denominators are the same, 4 and 4. We know that if there is a bigger numerator, there is more slices. So would I rather have 3 if both pieces are divided into 4 equal pieces? What is going to be bigger? Getting 3 out of 4 of those pieces or getting 1 out of 4 of those pieces? 3 is going to be bigger. Okay, number 2, if I go back to my comparing fractions steps, look and see if the denominators are the same, 9 and 12, nope. Check and see if the numerators are the same, 8 and 8. Oh, they are. So I'm going to circle my numerators that are the same. If the numerators are the same, it's like how many pieces you get depending on how many slices they are divided into. So if a pizza is divided into 2 equal parts and you get 1 whole piece, versus if a pizza is divided into 100 equal parts and you get 1 little tiny piece, you are going to want more. You're going to want the 1/2. So let's think of this for number 2. My numerators are the same. So would I rather get 8 pieces if the pizza is divided into 9 equal parts? Or would I rather get 8 pieces of pizza if it's divided into 12 equal parts? I would rather get 8 out of 9 equal parts because the 9 equal parts are going to be bigger pieces than the 12 equal parts. That's one way to think of it. You could also make common denominators and change the denominator to something, but you would have to do 9 times 12 to each one, and that's kind of hard. But you could, or you could just do it that way. Either way will work. I just did it that way because it's less work. Okay. Let's look at number 3, 1/2 compared to 5/8. Numerators are different, denominators are different, so I'm going to have to make an equivalent fraction. There's 2 ways to make an equivalent fraction. I can change the smaller denominator to the bigger denominator. Like here, I can do 3 times something to get me to 6. Let's see if I can do this here. Can I do 2 times something to get me to 8? Yes, I can, and that way I can change 1/2 and I don't have to change 5/8. So I'm going to start by 1/2 and I'm going to multiply it by a whole to get a denominator of 8. So I need to ask myself 2 times what equals 8? I know 2 times 4 equals 8. I have to multiply by a whole when I'm making an equivalent fraction. So I have to multiply by 4 over 4, or 1 whole. 1 times 4 equals 4, and I get 4/8. So I'm going to cross out this 1/2 and change it to 4/8. Now that my denominators are the same, I can ask what's bigger, 4 pieces out of 8 or 5 pieces out of 8? And 5 is bigger, so I'm going to put a less than sign. All right, number 4, we have 3/4 compared to 1/5. Numerators are different, denominators are different, so I need to make an equivalent fraction. Can I change the smaller denominator to a bigger denominator? Will 4 times something get me to 5? No, 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 equals 8, so that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to change both denominators. And in this case, 5 times 8, I have to make the 5 into 40ths because I can also make the 8 into 40ths. So if I do 4 times 5, I get 20. So I'm going to use that as my common denominator. And I'm going to do 3/4 times what whole would get me to 20. I know 4 times 5 equals 20, so I'd have to multiply by the whole, 5 over 5. 3 times 5 equals 15. So I'm going to change 3/4 to 15/20. Now I have to do the same thing with 1/5 because the denominators are still different, 20 and 5. So I have to make this 5 into a 20. So I'm going to do 1/5 times a whole, gets me something over 20. I know 5 times 4 equals 20. To multiply by a whole, I need to multiply by 4 over 4. 1 times 4 equals 4, and this is 4/20. Now I can compare because my pieces are divided into the equal parts, 20. And would I rather have 15 pieces out of 20 or 4 pieces? 15 is bigger, so I'm going to put my greater than sign. All right, number 5, 2/3 compared to 4/6. Numerators and denominators are both different, so I'm going to see if I can change my smaller denominator into my bigger denominator. Well, 3 times something equals 6, and yes, it will. So that means I only have to change this fraction, and I can leave this fraction alone. So I'm going to take 2/3, I'm going to multiply it by a whole to get a denominator of 6. I know 3 times 2 equals 6, so I can multiply by 2 over 2. 2 times 2 equals 4, and I get 4/6. If I change 2/3 to 4/6, now I can see that I'm comparing 4/6 to 4/6. They are the same, so I'm going to put in the equal symbol. 4/6 is equal to 4/6. Let's try number 6. We have 2/5 compared to 3/5. This time I can see my denominators are already the same. So the pizza is already divided into 5 equal parts. So I just need to decide what's bigger, 2 of those pieces or 3 of those pieces, and 3 pieces would be bigger. So 2/5 is less than 3/5. Your secret word is tuba. And you have to write it in all capital letters, T-U-B-A, all capital. Okay, let's move on to comparing decimals. We know the most important thing when comparing decimals is to make sure you have the same amount of digits on each side. So I can see 3/10 has a digit in the tenths place, and 7/100 goes out to the hundredths place. So I can add a 0 over here, so that way both places go to the hundredths place. Then I can ask myself, what's bigger, 30/100 or 7/100? And 30/100 is going to be bigger. Another way I can think about it is if I'm just comparing 0, 0, decimal, decimal, same so far. 3 and 0, here's my difference, 3 and 0, 3 is bigger. Let's take a look at number 8. We have 2/100 and 2/10. So I'm going to put this to the hundredths so I can compare easier. And I know 20/100 is going to be bigger than 2/100. I can also compare same and different. 0, 0, decimal, decimal, 0, 2. 0 and 2. 0 is going to be smaller. So 2/100 is less than 20/100. Number 9, this time I have the same amount of digits in my decimals, so they both go out to hundredths. So I can just ask 31/100 or 56/100, and 56/100 is bigger. I can also do like before, 0, 0, decimal, decimal, 3 and 5, that's my difference. 5 is bigger. So 31/100 is less than 56/100. Number 10. This goes to the tenths place, this goes to the hundredths place. So I'm going to change my tenths place to the hundredths place. And I have 60/100 and 60/100. They are exactly the same, so I'm going to put an equal sign. Number 11, 32/100 and 4/10. I'm going to add a 0 to my 4/10 to make it go to the hundredths place. And then I can see that 32/100 is going to be less than 40/100. Also, I could check this way, 0, 0, decimal, decimal, 3, 4, there's my difference, and 3 is less than 4. All right, last one, number 12, I can see it goes to the tenths place, 5/10, and the tenths place again, 8/10. So I don't need to change anything, I can just compare, 0, 0, decimal, decimal, 5 and 8 is where I have a difference, 8 is bigger, so 5/10 is less than 8/10. All right, let's flip to the back. The directions say find equivalent fractions with a common denominator in order from least to greatest. So there's 2 steps here. I have to find equivalent fractions when I need to, and I'm going to need to show my work to show how I got that. Then I'm going to need to put the answer in the box. So let's look at number 13. We have 4/7 and 2/7. That's nice because those denominators are the same, so those are easy to compare. I already know 4/7 is going to be bigger. But then I also have 1/3. And 1/3 has a different denominator. So I'm going to have to see if I can change my 1/3 into sevenths. And I know I can't because 3 times 1 equals 3, 3 times 2 equals 6, and 3 times 3 equals 9. So since that doesn't work, I'm going to have to change both denominators, or in this case, all 3 fractions. I know if I do 7 times 3, I get 21, and I can use that as my common denominator. So I'm going to do 4/7, and I'm going to multiply by a whole to get a denominator of 21. I know 7 times 3 equals 21. I need to multiply by a whole, so 3/3. So 4 times 3 equals 12, and I get 12/21. Then I'm going to do the same to 2/7. I need to multiply by a whole to get a denominator of 21. I already know 7 times 3 equals 21, so I multiply by my whole, 3/3. 2 times 3 equals 6, and I get 6/21. Then I have to take my last fraction, 1/3, multiply that by a whole to get a denominator of 21. I know 3 times 7 equals 21, so I multiply it by the whole, 7/7. 1 times 7 equals 7, and I get 7/21. Okay, so now I'm going to look at all of my fractions with common denominators and put numbers to put them in order. I have 12 pieces out of 21, 6 pieces out of 21, and 7 pieces out of 21. Remember, the directions say least to greatest. So my smallest amount of pieces is right here, 6/21. Then next would be 7/21. And then finally 12/21. I need to make sure when I write in my answer that I'm not writing my new equivalent fractions, but I'm writing the fractions they gave me. So I'm going to circle the old fractions and make sure that's what I write in my box. So my first one, or my smallest fraction, is 2/7, put a comma. Then my second fraction is 1/3. Then my third fraction is 4/7. Let's try number 14. I have the fractions 1/12, 2/3, and 1/4. I can see that if I do 4 times 3, I get 12. So that means I can change both of these fractions to 12ths and leave this one alone. So I don't have to change that. I only have to change 2. So I'm going to start with 2/3. I'm going to multiply by a whole to get a 12 in my denominator. I know 3 times 4 equals 12, and I need to multiply by a whole, so 4/4. 2 times 4 equals 8, and I get 8/12. So I'm going to cross out this fraction here, 2/3, because I changed it to 8/12. Now I need to do the same thing for 1/4. I need to multiply it by a whole to get a denominator of 12. I know 4 times 3 equals 12. Multiply by a whole, 3/3. 1 times 3 equals 3, and I get 3/12. So I'm going to cross out 1/4 and change it to 3/12. Now I'm going to look up here, look at all of my 12 fractions and number them in order from least to greatest. So 3 is going to be my smallest number of pieces. Oh, actually, it's not. I forgot over here 1 is going to be my smallest number of pieces. So here's 1. Then is going to be 3, that's my number 2. And then 8 is going to be my number 3. Remember, I don't want to write the equivalent fractions that I changed. I want to write the original fractions. So I'm going to circle all of my originals, even though I just crossed them out, and I'm going to put them in order. 1 is 1/12. After that, 2 is 1/4. And my biggest fraction, number 3, is 2/3. All right, number 15. Here's your bonus, a music note. I have the fractions 1/4, 5/6, and 4/12. So let's see, my biggest one is 4. I know I can take the denominator 4 and change that into 12, 4 times 3. And I could take the denominator 6 and change that into 12, 6 times 2. That way I can just change these two fractions, and that means I can leave that one alone, less work. So I'm going to start with 1/4. I'm multiplying it by a whole to get to a common denominator of 12. I know 4 times 3 equals 12. I have to multiply by a whole to make an equivalent fraction. 1 times 3 equals 3, and I get 3/12. So I'm going to cross out this 1/4 and change it to 3/12. Now I have to do the same thing with 5/6, multiply by a whole to get a denominator of 12. 6 times 2 equals 12. I need to multiply it by a whole to get an equivalent fraction, 2/2. 5 times 2 equals 10. So I'm going to cross out 5/6 and change it to 10/12. Then I don't need to change my 4/12 because the denominator's already in 12s. So let's number them in order. I have 3/12 is going to be my smallest. Then next is going to be 4/12, and then finally is going to be 10/12. Don't forget to circle the original fractions, even though we crossed some of them out, because that's what you're going to write in your answer box. So my smallest fraction is 1/4, comma, next is 4/12, and finally is going to be 5/6. All right, one more, number 16. We have 3/5, 2/5, and 1/2. So I'm going to start by looking to see if I can take my smaller denominator and changing it into my bigger denominator. That would be nice because these are the same, and then I wouldn't have to change my fifths. But I can't do 2 times something to get to 5 because 2 times 2 is 4 and 2 times 3 is 6. So that means I'm going to have to change them all and find a common denominator. I can do that by taking my denominator 5 and my denominator 2. 5 times 2 equals 10. I can change all of the fractions into tenths. So if I want to start with 3/5 and multiply by a whole to get a denominator of 10, I know 5 times 2 equals 10, so I multiply by the whole, 2/2. 3 times 2 equals 6, and I'm going to change 3/5 to 6/10. Now moving on to 2/5. I need to multiply by a whole to get a denominator of 10. 5 times 2 equals 10. Multiply by the whole, 2/2. 2 times 2 is 4. And I changed 2/5 to 4/10. Then finally 1/2. Multiply it by a whole to get a denominator of 10. 2 times 5 equals 10. Multiply by the whole, 5/5. 1 times 5 equals 5, and this becomes 5/10. Now let's look at my tenths and put them in order from least to greatest. 4 is my smallest, then comes 5, then comes 6. Circle your first fractions or your old fractions to make sure you're writing the correct thing in your answer box. 1 smallest is going to be 4/10. Then is, oops, I almost wrote, you can see I messed up. I did 4/10. I didn't almost do it, I really messed up. I wasn't supposed to write 4/10, and I did it in pen that doesn't erase. So if you did that, erase. I'm gonna cross out and start again. 1 is gonna be 2/5, my original fraction. 2 is gonna be 1/2, my original fraction. 3 is going to be 3/5, my original fraction. So don't make the mistake I started to. Always write your original fractions. All right, that was your practice test. I hope you did a good job with your fractions and decimals. You'll do great on your test tomorrow. Study hard.